Hello, welcome back to the next session for Python for Maya artists. Today I want to talk about three topics. Those are strings, which are text data, and slices, which is how you can get data from a list in very intelligent ways. And I want to talk about Maya object names and what to do when you have name conflicts and how you make your tools a little bit more robust by using full path names instead of individual object names. Let's get right into it. So strings can do a lot of things, and they're very similar to lists in a way. So I think last time we talked a little bit about utilities that we have for lists and stuff, and they all work on strings as well. So you can imagine that a string like this, it's very similar to just a list with individual characters. So these are kind of identical compared to what you can do with them. So if I have, for example, enumerate, I can print the if that will work. I have to
convert it back to a list.
Yeah, first. So if I use the list as a function, it will convert this enumerate object, which is something that you can use in a for loop, into something that is more directly usable, because then it will just be a list like this. And that has, for example, the number and the character. And that's very similar to what you could do with a list. So list enumerate. This will give us the same kind of data. And that way all of these utilities will work, and you can do for loops over a string. So for example, x is in by z, print axis. That will just get the individual elements as if it was a list formatted like this. But strings can do a lot more, and there's a lot of functions. So I would like to refer you to the Python help. So that is not the Maya command reference, but it's the actual Python documentation. So Python string help. That should give us this website, docs.python.org, and it automatically defaults to version 3. Currently Maya is back on version 2.7. They will be very similar, and the next version of Maya should be on version 3. So you can basically just use this one, and only if it doesn't work, you can just double check on 2.7 if that's the issue, that the code that you're using might be too new. But in general, there's just all these functions, or no, these are constants. Yeah, these are the functions that you could use. And there's a lot more the more you scroll. Let's see, for example, we can go to this one. Oh yeah, and that's for some reason in version 3 they split it up into two pages, one called str and the other called string, but they are kind of the same thing, and this is even more functions that you could use. So if you're looking for something, it's probably in here, but I'll just demonstrate a few of them and how to use them.
Might be also interesting to show one of the constants that you just talked about. So the
yeah,
lower letters
yeah.
is one that might be very beneficial if you need to have like the alphabet.
Yeah, true. So that's when we're talking about strings in Python, it's actually called str. So that's the type, and if I put a float in there, it will convert it for us to a piece of text. So this is now string data instead of float data. I can print the type, for example, so you can see it. But then there's also the string, and you have to import that. I believe it's just like this. And then you have string dot ASCII lower, for example, and that is nope.
I think it's string dot ASCII lower letters.
Ah, okay, ASCII lowercase or ASCII letters. I see. So that gives you the alphabet if you ever wanna check, like if a value is inside of this set of characters. So if a in print, okay, you can do this kind of stuff. And if it's 0, then that will not be in the ASCII lowercase set, so it's not printing, okay. You can use that to validate data. If you want a specific character to not exist in a name, you can verify that all the characters in a name in a for loop go over the characters, verify that they're in this subset. And if you use letters, you get like both upper and lowercase. So you can quickly verify your text data that way.
Also in Maya, you mostly use a value ranging from 0 to any count of digit to validate any object that occurs multiple times. But sometimes you have in a workflow that you cannot use digits, but you always need to use letters. Then you can easily convert the digit into a letter using the string operator.
So you get this one, and then you just use the index 0,
Exactly.
1. Yeah, that's clever. It's a nice way to go from numbers to alphabet. But back to our original string, so without importing anything, we just have our textual data. And this is how you call a function on that. So you put a dot, and then you can say dot upper, and then you put brackets to call the function, and that gives you upper data, for example. That will convert the text to uppercase and give you uppercase text to work with. And there are so many of these. You can of course do lower, and you can do capitalize, which kind of formats it as a nice sentence. I quite like that. So whatever comes in, it could have weird uppercase characters in weird places. I don't do this. Then it will always just make lowercase and then capitalize the first character. So if you want to display something in an interface or print out something as a readable text to the user, this can kind of make it look clean and more legible. Then there's a lot of utilities where we can use for checking data again. So if, for example, we want, we're building a character rig and we have a left side and a right side, we want to check that the joints that we have selected all end with underscore left, for example. So we can have arm underscore left dot ends with, and then we can say I want to check whether it ends with double underscore left. And if I select the right arm, then that might return false. And you can also use starts with, and that's how you can verify naming conventions. And that's a really clever way where you can avoid making complicated interfaces or doing complex stuff with your data. Just print out a sheet for your users to say, for this script to work, use this naming convention. And then all your code can just use these ends with, start with string functions to really have a very powerful way to organize and detect the data in the file. You could list everything that ends on left and then do stuff with it.
The same as here, you start with and ends with. We used in line 13 if 0 or if the string 0 in or O in string ASCII letters, then you actually check for a specific string if it occurs in the entire setup. So if you can like open up a text file, you can actually check if a certain sentence, if that sentence is exactly the same, you can check if that's in the text file as well.
Yeah, and this doesn't need to be one character either. You can really just say, left arm joint or something, and then you can just, if this is my data, I can say if arm in data, print, okay. So it will just search this entire piece of text. So unlike starts with and end with, it will find it anywhere inside of the text. So that's the third option where you just say this needs to be inside of the string. And ends with and start with are really anchoring it to the start or end where you can more easily find suffix prefix data. Another thing that you might sometimes have is when you read a text file, for example, is that there's some white space at the end of every line, or there's some white space at the bottom or at the top, where someone just put like multiple new lines and then put some text in the middle, or even indented that text, for example. Then there's the strip function, which will clean up any white space before and after the meaningful part of the text. So this will just give us that text without all that other stuff around it.
So here he actually uses the triple quotes around it, just to make sure that everything that is captured in between is in there. So new lines, tabs, any spaces will also be captured.
Yeah, so just like you have lists where you can basically put new lines in between list items for organization purposes, with strings you can't really do that. You can really say ABC. So there's the triple quotes, and then it becomes a multi-line string, and then now it starts capturing here. So it starts with a new line, ABC, and then it also ends with a new line before I stop the text. So you probably just want to use it like this, so you don't have to use strip all the time. But just to be sure, you could strip it, and then that would be identical to the other version where it's just this.
Also, when you use this, make sure you always close it, otherwise Python will not recognize it.
You mean with a triple quote at the end? Yeah. And this is also how you can do comments, by the way. So if you sometimes see this like this without assigning it to a variable, usually it's because someone wants to write a intermediate description of what is going on. And that's just how you can use multiple lines with a bunch of information that you want to share to the reader of the code, instead of using a bunch of these hashes in front of multiple lines, because it's harder to manage compared to just a piece of text that you can just have all the freedom that you want.
Also, in this case, you can interchange the double quotes and the single quotes, but you need to make them work in order. So you can't have like double quote and then double quote in the same.
Yeah, so I think it's good to use double quote because you often have this kind of stuff in the English language, at least. So if you use single quotes, then that becomes a problem, and that's why double quotes tend to be a better starting point. What is going on?
Double mouse.
Can I disable my touchpad? That's not good. Oh, why are you on? Go away. That should help.
So yeah, also if you use just a single double quote to start a string, you can still use the single quotes in between. It doesn't have to be that you always need the triple double quotes to do that.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, it's like this as well. So this is going to be part of the text. So that will just work fine.
And the single quotes can also open the long piece of text string that you just have.
Why is it being weird? Got a new hardware setup since today, and it doesn't want to work when I select text and press enter to run the code.
Well, at least you can type, so you can use the arrow on top.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just try to remember that. What is the other thing? I want to show you format, which I think we've shown before, but I'm not sure. So if you have a string, you can put these curly braces in the middle of what you're talking about. The value is, for example, like this. And then you can type dot format, and then between the brackets you can put the value that you want to format and that location. And this works as many times as you want. So you could say I have 3 value for like a position of an object, then it's very nice to just be able to say I write the readable text first, like the way I want to display it to the user, and then I put in the values, which could be variable names and whatever you want it to be.
This is something that I usually use a lot when formulating an error. So if you have an error in your code, you can actually format, I found an error, you can tell what kind of error it is, you can tell what the value is when the error occurred, so you can format it like a nice piece of text that is human readable and it gives you all the information to find where you need to find the solution.
Yeah, so to display how to do errors, you can import CMDS, and then you can have CMDS.warning, which prints a yellow message and then just goes on. You can do CMDS.error, which prints a red message and then stops running your code. So if you ever call this, the rest of the code is no longer executed. And that's a way where you can like jump out of your script in case something went wrong and you want to display to the user like this is what you're doing wrong. And it can be simple. Like you have to select 2 objects and you only have 1 selected. And you can just display that as an error, and then your code will just stop until the user corrects their mistake.
I think you can even show it with the this position is and then the format and just input it in the warning into the error so people can see what's doing.
Yeah, sure. So you see it in the status bar at the bottom when I run this. I forgot to run the CMDS line. So this will just be yellow and it puts the word warning in front of it. And same for error, where it's red, and it puts the word error in front of it. And because we have stack trace enabled in the history settings, it will also give us this extra info in the script editor. So a few more useful functions that you might want to know about are, one of them is split. So if you have, for example, a prefix and an object name and a suffix, you can use .split, and then you can put any character that you want to use to split, or any piece of text really. So this could be, let's say it's not one underscore. Okay, this is not working. Plug over my keyboard with the mouse. Fix the streaming setup later. Recording setup. Thank you. So let's say we have a comma and a space, then it will just split on the comma and the space, and then it gives us a list with 3 strings in there. And that's super useful when you have long names with suffixes. You can just split on the suffix, or when you have intermediate things like arm L or left joint or something, you can split on that L to figure out like what's the name and what's the type, or depending on your naming convention, this can give you a lot of different things you can do. The opposite of split is called join. So when I have a list like this with 3 strings in there, I can use any character like underscore dot join. So that's a string where I then use the function join, and then you put in a list of strings and it will join them up using that character that you give. So I went from having comma and space, split on that, and then rejoin them with an underscore, and then you get just one string that has underscores in there, which is fairly similar to replace. So you could also take this string and just say dot replace comma space with underscore. But these have different uses. You don't usually use split and join like this, but if you use them in sequence, then it's identical to replace really.
Sometimes you would get a list back from certain elements in Maya, and that is actually not a list, it's converted to a string. So it's basically the string with the way that we normally annotate the list.
A bit like this.
And then you can just split it up in this way to actually get a string of data back.
Yeah, yeah. I think stuff like polyinfo have that. When you want to get the normal of a mesh, it will give it as a string. I'll put something like normal of phase 0 or something is 0.0 minus 1, 0.0. It can give you something like this. And then if you want to clean that up, you can first split on the colon here, and then you get the second value where you just have this, and then you can strip it so it removes that white space. And then you can again split on comma and space.
Isn't it just the comma now? Ah, yeah, the in between white spaces still exist.
Yeah, yeah. So that's an example of how you could use this if you get data like this. And it could be from Maya, it could be from a text file. If you're reading an OBJ file, for example, then you have geometry data in text. So.
Same if you want to store your own data and you just convert a list to string, because before we actually converted the string to a list, you can actually also convert a list or list to the string itself. So the same way around.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few caveats as well. When you want to search replace text, it will not understand the word boundaries. So I can have hello world 1, world 2, world, dot replace world with earth. It will replace all the worlds, regardless of whether that was actually the word. It just looks inside of the text, and it can be a substring as well. So if you have disk world, then that can go kind of wrong. And that's something you want to watch out for. So when you're using replace or split, you really want to make sure that what you're splitting on is really not going to occur somewhere out of context, which is especially dangerous when you have prefix and suffix data and you're splitting on, for example, underscore capital L without the second underscore. This could also be, you know, leverage, and then you're accidentally splitting on something that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think we've been going on for quite a while about strings, so I'm just gonna pause it and then continue with slices after I debug my mouse and keyboard.